Welcome to this recording. This will be a recording showing you how to complete the different activities of the Unit 2 database unit, also known as Unit 2, creating systems to manage information. This video will show you how to complete the queries for activity 3 of the Unit 2 databases unit. So I'll do a separate video that shows you how to save the evidence for activity 3A, 3B and 3C. Okay, so without further ado, I'll show you 3 different examples. This will be the first example. So for context, on this paper you've got tickets for events, you've got different ticket types, and you've got some tickets that are being sold and some tickets that have not been sold. So this is for Rock Hill Music Festival. That was the scenario for this paper. So for activity 3A, create a query to display an alphabetically sorted list of regular and new customers. It must show the customer name and telephone number only. Okay, so we'll get started with that. This is the database file that we're working with. So as always, you go to create and you navigate to query design. Then you will save your query first using the naming convention QRY followed by the activity name. Now I highly recommend each time you do the query, whether it's 3A, 3B or 3C, please make sure you only use the figure 1 table unless you're 100% confident you did the tables correctly when you did activity 1. Because if you didn't do it correctly, you're going to get the wrong results and you will not be getting full marks. Okay, so I always start off with the easy part. The easy part is adding the field names that it wants me to show or to display on the query. Here it indicates it must show the customer name and telephone number only. So we'll add the customer forename, the customer surname and telephone. Next, create a query to display an alphabetically sorted. So it doesn't indicate whether you should sort it by the forename or the surname, so you select one or the other. I'm going to select Ascending. So if we click run, this is what we currently get. Now the last part of the query is to indicate the criteria. So the criteria here, it only wants to display this information for regular and new customers. So I'll go to the figure 1 table to investigate what fields indicate if a customer is a regular customer or a new customer. And instantly we can see there's 2 different fields that indicate if a customer is a regular customer or a new customer. So I could use the customer type, where I would type in the criteria regular or new, or I could use customer type ID, where I would type in the criteria, the values 1 or 2, because those are the values that indicate if a customer is a regular or a new customer. I'm going to use customer type. So I'll copy this. I go to design view. I add customer type. So make sure you enter the name exactly as it's spelled. So regular or new. So now if I click run, this is the result that I get. So be careful here. It indicates it must show the customer name and telephone number only. Nowhere does it indicate they want you to display the customer type. So I need to get rid of that column by clicking or detoggling that button. Okay, so this is complete for this past paper. That's how you would have done 3A. Now ideally you wouldn't want this information duplicating. However, this is a consequence of only using the figure 1 table. This is the only example where using the figure 1 table will return to you incorrect result in terms of its duplicated one result. However, you'd still get majority of the marks if you did activity 3A this way using only the figure 1 table. You might lose a mark at most. Okay, so we move on to the next example. So remember, in terms of how to save the evidence for 3A, 3B, 3C, I'll do a separate video. So we'll now move on to the January 2021 past paper. So for context on this past paper, you had different artists that had different art items on display, and there's exhibitions that would take place and predicted sales where people might buy the different art items that the artists would be trying to sell. Now that we've got the context out of the way, we can start looking at the activity. Create a query to display an alphabetically sorted list of commercial galleries that have exhibitions running for at least 5 days. We must show the gallery name, gallery type, and number of days only. So we go to create, we select query design. Before we do anything, we save the name of the query using the naming convention QRY, followed by the activity name. So I only need to use the figure 1 table. So we start off with the easy part, which is add to the query the fields that it would like displayed. So gallery name, gallery type, and number of days only. Next part, it needs to be alphabetically sorted. So I'm going to sort it by the gallery name. So if I click run, this is what we currently get. Now the criteria here, they only want this information for commercial galleries. So we can go back to design view, and on the criteria underneath gallery type we can type in commercial, so that it only shows information for the commercial galleries. Perfect. The last part of this query, it should only show exhibitions that are running for at least 5 days. So for example, the top 2 should not show because they're only running for 3 days. So we can go to the criteria, number of days, and we can put greater than 4 because 5 is greater than 4 and the criteria states at least 5 days. So now we click run, and that would be it for this activity, for this past paper. That's how you would have done it. We move on to the last example for 3A, which will be the June 2022 paper. So for context here, you've got a company that supplies vending machines like to a college or businesses. Then they were using a database to store the details of the staff members that would be responsible for going to the businesses to install those vending machines. Okay, that's the context. So we can now move on to completing the activity 3A for this past paper. I hope these videos will help. They do take quite a long time to create. So we always save the name of the activity using the naming convention QRY, followed by the activity name, and we only need to use the figure 1 table. And we start off with the easy part, which is, you got it, adding the fields that it wants us to show. So it must show the name of the position. So we add position over here. The next part, the number of staff members, we don't have that field. Okay, so this example is a bit mean for 3A. 3A is usually very simple. So we need to investigate on the figure 1 table. My apologies, I did not actually read out the instructions of the query, did I? Create a query to display an alphabetically sorted list of positions that have at least 2 staff members currently working in that position. It must show the name of the position and the number of staff members only. So we want to show job positions that have at least 2 staff members working, and then we indicate the number of staff members working in that position. Okay, so on the figure 1 table we now investigate how we can know this. Well, if it shows a job position more than once, that means there's more than one person working that job position. So if we see position ID that's been repeated, it means there's more than one person working that job position. So for example, position ID 2 shows up 2 times, which means there's 2 different people working this job position. In fact, there's 3 for position ID number 2. 1, 2, 3. So we go back to design view. On our query, and we're going to add position ID, and then we're going to click this magic button called totals at the top, and where it says group by under position ID, we're going to select count. So count will count how many position IDs there are for each number. So for example, it will count how many position ID 2s there are. Okay, so if we click run, it shows us the position name. So position ID 2, that's vending machine operator. So it's showing us position ID 2 comes up 3 times. So how many job positions have more than, or have at least 2 staff members employed? How many? Okay, yeah, there's 3. Office assistant, salesperson, and vending machine operator. Now, they're a bit tricky here, okay? They really wanted you to be very careful that you've read the instructions of the query. So we're not done yet. First, I'll rename this column. So instead of count of position ID, I'm going to rename it to number of staff members. So to rename a column, you go to design view, you put your cursor behind the first letter of the field name. So I'm putting my cursor behind, I'm clicking behind the P of position ID. Then I'll type in the name of the column that I want without any spaces. Do not put any spaces when you name your columns. It will mess up your queries. So here I'll put num of staff, then I'll put a colon, and I'll show you in Notepad what I just did. That's what I just did. Okay, so this was what it would have been originally. I put my cursor behind the first letter, then I type in the name of my column, then I can add a space after this colon here if I want to. You don't have to, but you can do. So if I click run, you see instead of count of position ID, it now says number of staff. Now the part I was saying you need to be careful of, they mentioned that you should only show the job position that currently have 2 staff members. This is not necessarily current. Okay, so we'll change this criteria first. So here it must be greater than 1 because it says here at least 2 staff members. 2 is greater than 1. Okay, this is not necessarily correct because it says that have at least 2 staff members currently in that position. What am I talking about? If you go to the figure 1 table, if there is a position end date, that means that staff member is not currently serving in that job position anymore. Okay, so I'm going to add position end date to my query, and I'm going to indicate is null, meaning if there's at least 2 staff members and there's no end date. Okay, and let's see what happens. So position end date, and the criteria here I put is null. I'll deselect it because I don't actually need to show it. So if I click run, what happened, it only shows 1 job position now. This is absolutely correct because, for example, salesperson comes up 2 times. You've got it here, you've got it here. However, here you've got an end date, meaning currently there's actually only 1 person working there. Office assistant again comes up 2 times. However, here there's an end date, meaning there's actually 1 current staff member serving as an office assistant. So for this example, that's all you would have needed to do for this example of 3A. So I'll move on to the next example on how to complete activity 3B of the Unit 2 databases unit. I hope this is helpful. Catch you on the next one.